Not many people in the world that scare me more than this guy does. John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown. This is one of the most infamous serial killer cases ever. John was born in Chicago. He had two siblings, one older and one younger sister. His dad was also John. He served in the war but was now working in auto repairs, and his mother was a stay-at-home mom. John had a very close relationship with his mom and his sisters, but one of the main things they had in common is that they were all scared of the father. John Sr. was a very angry person, and anytime that he would get violent. He would take his anger out on his family, both physically and verbally. One of John's earliest memories was when his father beat him as a child with a leather belt, which was not uncommon. When his father would he would make John feel this big. He would constantly tell him that he was not a real man and that he would never be. John spent a lot of his childhood looking for validation and love from his father, but all he ever got was the complete opposite. In 1949, when John was only 7 years old, him and a friend were caught doing inappropriate things to a young girl, and when his father found out, he him with the belt as punishment. That same year, his father introduced John to one of his friends who ended up SAing John in more than one occasion. However, John never told anyone about this because he knew that somehow his father would find a way to blame it on him, and he wouldn't believe him, and he would make sure that no one else believed him either. John also had a pretty serious heart condition that he would be in and out of the hospital for, and because of that, he was very fit, he was very athletic, which was not his fault, but he would get bullied for that. When John was 20, he was tired of his life at home. He got up and moved to Vegas. In Vegas, he got a job at the morgue, and because he hadn't found anywhere to live, he started living at the morgue. He would sleep in one of the back rooms and no one ever noticed. On one of his nights living at the morgue, he got curious and he pulled out a dead body of a young boy. And John Wayne Gacy laid next to the body and cuddled him for a few minutes until he eventually started to freak out. He put the body back, immediately got out of there, called his mom, asked if he could come home. After only 3 months of living in Vegas, he was back at home living in Chicago. When he got back home, he enrolled in school, graduated in 1963. By 1964, he was working in sales for a shoe shop in Springfield, Illinois. It was there where he met his coworker, Marlon Myers. They fell in love and they were married by September of 1964. Shortly after, him and Marilyn moved to Waterloo, Iowa because Marilyn's father had purchased 3 KFC restaurants that he pretty much just handed to them and John would be managing them. The couple had 2 kids together and everything was perfect until it wasn't. Because John Gacy had a wandering eye, and inside he could tell that he was kind of living in a lie because he had the wife, he had the kids, but deep down who he knew he was really attracted to were men, specifically young boys. John opened what he called the club. It was in the basement of one of the restaurants, and he would often invite his employees to come to the club after working. He didn't invite every single employee. He would narrow it down and he would only extend an invite to the employees that were young boys. He would only socialize with males and he would be very creepy towards them when they all hung out at the club. In August of 1967, John was 25 years old. His first victim was 15-year-old Donald. Donald was the son of someone that John knew, and he was able to lure him into his house with the promise of showing him. When they were watching that, John turned to Donald and said that before he could engage in any sort of those activities with a girl, he had to do it with a man first. He convinced him to participate in these gross acts with John. And John did not only convince Donald to do that with him, he convinced a lot of other young men. He would tell the young men that he was doing these things for science. John would say that he was studying and that all of this was just a big scientific experiment. After 6 months of that going on, Donald goes to his father and tells him that John has been SAing him. The father was livid, called the police, John was arrested. He would deny everything, and that would go to court. John paid another young boy to beat up Donald to avoid him testifying in court against him, which he just ended up getting in more trouble for. Awaiting trial, John was giving a psychiatric evaluation. He was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. He went to court, was found guilty, and sentenced to 10 years. That same day, his wife filed for divorce, and John never saw his wife or his kids ever again. During his time in prison, he was so popular in there, people loved him. While he was in there as well, his father passed away. June 18th, 1970, after only serving 18 months of his 10-year sentence, he was let out on parole, and he would only be on probation for 1 year. Within 24 hours of his release, he was back living in Chicago. He was 28 at that point, and shortly after arriving in Chicago, he got a job as a chef. Only 9 months into his probation, he gets charged again for SA of a teenage boy. That boy said John saw him at a bus stop, lured him into his car, tried to SA him. However, John did not get in trouble for this. It was just dismissed by the court when the victim failed to show up to court. June 22nd, only 4 days of John's probation being over, he tried to do the same thing again. He pretended to be a cop, showed a fake badge, and lured another young boy into his car, SA'd him. But those charges would later be dropped as well. By October 18th, 1971, because the Board of Parole never heard about those 2 incidents, they thought John was this new, well-behaved, improved man. His criminal convictions in Iowa were sealed. His record was wiped clean. John bought a new house with financial assistance from his mom, and it was in that house where he would go on to commit all of his murders. When he moved in, all of the people in the neighborhood loved him. He was always lovely to neighbors, I guess, always willing to help, and every single year he would throw these massive themed parties. He would invite hundreds of people, including politicians, and the people would look forward to these annual parties because in their eyes, John was so awesome and great. August 1971, John reconnects with Carol Hoff from high school. They get engaged, they get married, and Carol, along with her 2 daughters, move into the house with John. That same year, John starts his own construction company, and he likes to hire a lot of young boys. John would flirt with them, make them feel very uncomfortable. He did actually essay one of them on a work trip to Florida. Then only a couple years into their marriage, John tells his wife that he is bi. One day in 1975, after they do the deed one night, John looks at his wife and tells her that that was the last time they were ever going to do that. He then started spending majority of his time outside the house and away from his family. If he did go home, his wife would catch him sneaking in teenage boys into their house in the early hours of the morning. He also found plenty of evidence that young boys had been inside the house, evidence that they were not there for work reasons. John was very attracted to the boys that he would bring over, and he was doing stuff with them, if you get what I'm saying. That same year, John finds a club called the Jolly Joker Club. It's a clown club. Basically a group of men that would dress up as clowns. They would work in parties, political functions, charity events, and children's hospitals. And John thought, great, this is for me. He joins the club. He gave himself 2 characters. First, Pogo the Clown. Pogo was the happy clown, and then there was Patches the Clown. He was a more serious, angry clown. And he started booking some jobs. In May of 1975, John hires 15-year-old Anthony to work for him. 2 months into working together, knowing that Anthony had an injured ankle and was just at home vulnerable, John goes to his house with a bottle and he puts handcuffs on him with plans of what we can assume are plans to essay him. However, Anthony was able to free himself from the handcuffs. He put them on John, and after a long conversation and a lot of fake apologies, John just left his house. Anthony continued to work for John after that, and John didn't try to mess with him again. July 26, 1976. I'm talking through this really fast because I don't want this video to be 19 hours long. Please know that every victim in this story is just as important. So isn't it crazy that this is someone's life? It's always the men that just look normal, isn't it? Because John was so loved in his neighborhood and by his family and friends. And in reality, he's just living this sick double life. Anyway, John picks up an 18-year-old hitchhiker named David. He offers him a job. He later puts handcuffs on him and dresses up as Pogo the Clown. And literally told David that he had intentions to essay him. Luckily, David was able to get away, but a month later, John showed up to his bedroom and looked at him and said, quote, "Dave, you really don't know who I am. Maybe it would be good for you to just give me what I want." End quote. He tried to attack him again, but he was luckily unable to do so again. December 11th, 1978, John is 36 years old at this time. He went to a pharmacy in Des Plaines, Illinois. He saw a young boy working as a cashier there, Robert Peast. He starts chatting with him, asking him how much he gets paid to work there. And Robert tells him, and John says, "Well, that's interesting because I own my own construction company and I pay my employees half of that amount." After Robert's shift was over, his mom went to go pick him up. Robert ran over to her and says, "I'll be right back because some contractor wants to talk to me about some job." He leaves at 9 p.m. When time passed and his mom couldn't find him, she goes home in a panic and reports him as a missing person. The police were on this immediately. The mom was able to tell them that he was last seen at the pharmacy. The pharmacy was able to tell them the name of the contractor who had been there that day, John Wayne Gacy. Police look him up, and even though his record had been wiped, they could still see previous accusations and convictions for things that he had done in the past. They can tell that his preferred victim is exactly the kind of person that Robert was. Now it's everyone go into action, all hands on deck. We need to find John Wayne Gacy. Where the is John Wayne Gacy? They find his address, go to his house. He answers the door. They ask him what he was up to that night. He says he did go to the pharmacy, but he didn't see any young boy. He didn't talk to any young boy. He just popped in to get what he needed to get and then left. Lie. They ask him if he could come down to the station for questioning, and he says that he can't right now. The cops say, "Okay, when can you?" And he says, quote, "You guys are very rude. Don't you have any respect for the dead?" End quote. When he does go to the police station, he shows up at 3 a.m. with mud all over him, and he just says he was in a car accident and doesn't want to talk about it. Weird. They again go through what John said he had been doing that night, and he says the same story again, but this time he adds a little white lie. He tells them the pharmacy owner called him to let him know that he forgot his notebook there. Lie. So for now, they let John go. They make him think that he's in the clear. Meanwhile, they're working on getting a search warrant for his house. 2 days after Robert's disappearance, the cops show up to John's house, obviously unannounced, with the search warrant. The suspicious things they found at the house: several police badges, several driver's licenses of different young boys, a class ring with initials engraved on it, magazines, handcuffs, and rope, amongst other things. Not looking good for you, Johnny boy. They investigate the initials that they found on that ring deeper. They contact the school. They find out who the ring belongs to. They find out that it belongs to a missing person. That's now 2 suspicious missing boys now tied to John Wayne Gacy. They keep peeling back the layer of this person who is John Wayne Gacy, and they look up his construction company as well as his employees, who all seem to be young boys. They see that one of his employees, a boy named Charles, was found dead in the Illinois River earlier that year, and it seemed like his death was just never investigated. 2 suspicious disappearances and now 1 suspicious death tied to John, so they decide that John needs to be on 24-hour surveillance. At the same time, they talk to David. Remember the hitchhiker that John picked up on the side of the road? Right, so police talk to David, and David mentions that for months, John had been having David dig up secret paths underneath his house. At the time, John told David that he was doing this for drainage and house maintenance, but now that he's really thinking about it, as well as police officers are thinking about it, this is terrifying. The man has secret tunnels underneath his house that are like a crawl space. They're 2 feet deep and 2 feet wide. Suspicion for John Wayne Gacy is through the roof. They were also told that when they were digging up these crawl spaces, John wanted a lot of limes in there. And limes, I guess, are used by a lot of contractors, construction workers, and landscapers. But when you mix lime with other things, you could also make a really toxic substance. A substance that can give you chemical burns. A substance that a lot of serial killers have used to dissolve human bodies. John is still under 24-hour surveillance, and I guess his way of dealing with it was to make friends with the cops, to be friendly to the ones that were watching him, to really make them think that he was a good guy. He's chatting them up. He invites them to come inside his house for a The officers obviously didn't really want to. They didn't want to hang out with John Wayne Gacy, but they did want to see inside his house. So they accept and they go inside. They're talking. One of the police officers gets up to go to the bathroom. He goes, he flushes the toilet. And when he does, a foul odor fills the room coming from the toilet. And let me tell you something about the smell of human decomposition. The smell of death. It's one that you never forget. And I do know what that smell is. Not because I killed someone, but because I used to work in property management and old people live there and old people die. But it is a smell that you never forget. It's such a distinct foul smell and nothing else smells like it. And when you smell death, you know that it's death. So the police officer immediately knows what that is. Now there's missing boys, a crawl space, and now the smell of death, all connected to the same man. This was already a crisis, but now it's a level 10 urgent crisis. Red neon flags flying all around, and every single one of them is shining on John Wayne Gacy. They need to get a second search warrant right now. December 20th, John drives over to go speak to his lawyer, and he shows up in terrible shape. I mean, he looked bad. So much so that as soon as he showed up, he asked for a beverage, if you know what I mean. His lawyer just handed it to him because it did look like he really needed it. John sits in front of his lawyer. He picks up a newspaper with Robert's face on it that says missing. He points to Robert's picture, looks at his lawyer and says, "This boy is dead. He is dead. He is in the river." The more beverages that he was having, the more he was spilling his nasty truth. John tells his lawyer that over the years, he has SA'd, abducted, tortured, and murdered at least 30 young boys. He describes all these boys as liars, and he describes himself as being the judge, jury, and executioner of many, many people. He says his secret crawl spaces led to a massive underground grave where most of the dead bodies were and had been for years. And then he says that he filled up the grave so much that he ran out of space, so his last 5 victims were dumped in the river because they didn't fit underneath his house anymore. And get this, in the middle of his confession, he falls asleep. You cannot make this up. When he woke up, he did not remember saying anything, and the lawyer tells him everything that he confessed to him. And John says, "Well, I can't think about this right now. I've got things to do," and leaves. John then starts driving around, and it seems like he was going to say his final goodbyes to his friends or whatever before he got arrested because he knew that it was coming. Law enforcement didn't want to risk this going wrong, so they arrest him on something unrelated, put him in a holding cell while they got this second search warrant. They went to go find out what was really in those crawl spaces. And guys, what they found, just bones. Endless amount of bones and decomposed bodies just stacked on top of each other. It was unbelievable. Back at the station, they tell John that police officers are still searching the crawl spaces, but with what they already found, he was already facing multiple murder charges. John then finally said that it was time to clear the air. And on December 22nd, 1978, he gave his official concession to every murder from start to finish. He told them that he abducted and killed at least 33 young men and boys, 26 of who were buried underneath in the crawl space. He says these boys were from Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana. He tells them how he did this. He said he would lure them into his house, handcuff them sometimes while being dressed up as Pogo the Clown. He would tell them that he was doing magic tricks for them. And then he would SA and torture them in horrible ways. He would then get out rope, and his rope trick that was used to murder them, he would tell his victims, this is the last trick, and then he killed them with a rope. He would keep his victims underneath his bed for up to 24 hours before putting them in the crawl space. John Wayne Gacy was found guilty of a lot, but most importantly, he was found guilty of 33 charges of murder. At the time, his conviction of 33 murders was the most for which any person in US history had been convicted of. He was given the death penalty and died on the 10th of May, 1994. It is really hard for me to believe that there are people like this that at one point had potential to be somewhat normal. He had a wife, he had kids, he had a house, the whole thing. And it's like, no, really, what went wrong? What fucks you up that bad for you to do that? And also, how do you sleep at night? I don't get it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm very interested to hear. I hope you've all been having the very best day, and I love you all literally so much. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.